Okay.
Okay, let's get the show on the road. I would like to welcome you to the Legislative Chambers for our public hearing, our first of two public hearings. My name is John Sarcone. I'm the Director of Housing for Nassau County's Office of Community Development. But before we start, I would like to, and if you can see it on the boards, I am very saddened to hear that Cedarhurst's Mayor Parisi passed away this weekend. He was always at our public hearings, and he would be remembered fondly. So if you can keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
Wow.
All right, we have a big turnout today. I see everyone's interested in learning community development. And just to think, a week from now is pitches and catches. So I'd like to turn it over to Kevin Green. He's going to be the moderator for today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to keep it at the end. All right, Kevin?
Thank you, John. Pitches and catches sounds nice. Feel like today. All right. Okay, we did do some greater outreach this year, so maybe that's the reason why we have such a large turnout. Part of the reason is because this is our 5-year consolidated planning year, so we'll get into that as the presentation moves forward. Okay, today, let me just start off with you're here today for the Nassau Urban County Consortium. The Urban County is an entitlement community under the United States Office of Housing and Urban Development's consolidated programs. And what that means is that we receive an annual allocation of funding under 3 different programs. There are actually four programs that make it the consolidated programs. The county gets funding under 3. The Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Investment Partnerships Program, and the Emergency Solutions Grants Program. So we'll go into the requirements, eligible activities, and the different aspects of those programs as we go forward. Now, the Nassau Urban County Consortium currently has 31 members, 31 municipal members, the 3 towns of Hempstead, North Hempstead, Oyster Bay, both cities from Nassau County, Long Beach and Glen Cove, and then 26 incorporated villages. There are 64 incorporated villages in Nassau County, so 26 have chosen to participate. And that is a 3-year cooperation cycle. So last year the county went through that requalification process, and these are the communities that elected to participate in the consortium. As I mentioned, this is a 5-year consolidated planning process this year. It's a collaborative process aimed at identifying a unified vision for community development actions to be undertaken during the 5-year period. The 5-year consolidated plan includes several parts. First being a strategic plan, which has an analysis of data and needs in the county, establishment of priorities and goals for the 5-year period. It also includes a fair housing plan or analysis of impediments. I'll go into that a little bit further. And the annual action plan, which includes information on the projects that will be funded during the year. Now, the 5-year consolidated plan was established by HUD when they merged several different programs into a consolidated application round. Previously, they had separate application processes and separate timeframes. So the consolidated plan merges them together so that we can fund projects and consider projects in a consolidated, comprehensive fashion. So this is our 4th consolidated plan. These are the 5-year periods that were covered under the previous plans. So 2015 program year will start in September. So we're at the beginning of the process right now. So the consolidated planning process consists of meetings with various stakeholders to assess the housing and community development needs in various categories, including homelessness, needs of the homeless, needs of the non-homeless, special needs. That would include people with disabilities, housing authorities within the county, that operate within the county, barriers to affordable housing throughout the county, and community development needs. The Fair Housing Plan, or the analysis of impediments, is also being prepared concurrently with the 5-year consolidated plan. It's an update to our fair housing plan and analysis impediments that was submitted 5 years ago. Now, there's HUD published a proposed rule in the Federal Register on July 19th, 2013. We discussed this at length last year as well. That proposed rule remains as a proposed rule, has not become a final rule as of yet. That proposed rule, we are using that in the planning process for our fair housing plan. Although those requirements have not yet been established, the county has elected to update our plan with those requirements in mind. So, part of the proposed rule indicates that through this rule, HUD proposes to provide HUD program participants with more effective means to affirmatively further the purposes and policies of the Fair Housing Act. And it goes on to state that the Fair Housing Act not only prohibits discrimination, but in conjunction with other statutes, directs HUD's program participants to take steps proactively to overcome historic patterns of segregation, promote fair housing choice, and foster inclusive communities for all. The updated fair housing plan and the analysis of impediments requires that program participants use HUD data to evaluate patterns of integration and segregation, racial and ethnic concentrations of poverty, and disparities in access to valuable community assets, and disproportionate housing needs based on protected class, and evaluate the primary determinants of these conditions. Program participants will also assess whether laws, policies, or practices limit fair housing choice, as well as the role of public investments in creating, perpetuating, or alleviating the segregation patterns revealed by the assessment. So the Fair Housing Plan, the analysis of impediments update that the county is undertaking will have these factors in mind. So as I mentioned, today we'll begin the process, the public participation process in development of the plan. Our office has been involved somewhat already, but today we open it up to the public for the first time. Again, we'll be asking for comment on different aspects of the 5-year consolidated plan, the annual action plan, the fair housing plan, and the analysis of impediments, which is really one document, but those last two. All right, so public comment is specifically requested on the housing needs in the county, the community development needs, and the fair housing needs. And John mentioned there'll be 2 hearings. Actually, there'll be 3 this year because we're in the 5-year year. The first public hearing is today, the needs hearing. The second needs hearing will take place on May 5th. And the third hearing will take place to present the proposed consolidated plan, and will also include the proposed awarding of funds under the 3 programs I mentioned. That hearing will take place on June 30th. All 3 meetings will be scheduled here. If you did not receive a email invitation to today's meeting, please make sure you sign in, and we'll make sure that you're added to the mailing list for future hearings. And written comment on any of the needs can be submitted at any time. So if you're not prepared to make a statement today, you can always submit it in writing. All written comments will be included in the document that is submitted to HUD, and a summary of any verbal comments will be included as well. Okay, so as far as the funding that's available, today we're announcing the availability of funds. We do not yet know what our figures are. HUD has not provided us with a budget as of yet. But we do anticipate receiving funds under the 3 programs, the CDBG programs, roughly $12.6 million, which is a reduction of about 1% from last year. Under the home program, we're anticipating a 10% cut, which is significant, yet again, under that program. And then the emergency shelter grant program, about $1,045,000 under that program. That's we anticipate to be stable. So I'll just go under each of the 3 programs in summary and explain what's eligible in each program and how you apply. So the eligible activities of the Community Development Block Grant Program are numerous. They're listed in the federal regulations, and they include acquisition of real property, disposition of real property. The acquisition of property can only be, the funds can only be used for that as long as the property that's being acquired is also used for an eligible purpose. Disposition of property, public facilities and improvements, clearance of land for another activity, public services, interim assistance, which would be assistance to, say, for street cleaning after a storm. Payment of non-federal share, and this is a very important category. Payment of non-federal share. Most times federal funds require a match of local funds. But because the block grant funds are considered entitlement program funds, you can use block grant funds as that match. So they are considered local funds for the purposes of a match. Urban renewal completion, relocation of tenants for property that's going to be acquired with block grant dollars or for use of the federal program. Loss of rental income, housing services, privately owned utilities. Some of these categories are infrequently used by the county. Home ownership assistance, micro enterprise assistance, technical assistance for nonprofits. That's where they're undertaking job training activities. And assistance to institutions of higher learning are all eligible under the program. Also continuing on with eligibility under the category of rehabilitation and preservation activities. Eligible activities would include residential rehabilitation, commercial rehab, code enforcement, historic preservation, renovation of closed buildings, and lead-based paint activities for residential purposes, but also for buildings that are being used to house services. So there's a community center, say, that's being used for youth programs. You can use the funds to abate lead paint. And economic development. Again, this is a category that's been not much used in the recent past, but especially economic development activities. So this is direct assistance to businesses, usually in the form of grants or loans, to acquire property or rehab property, build a building, or purchase equipment where there will be job creation or retention. So if you have an employer in your municipality that's looking for additional space or looking to add jobs, you can assist them in that way as well. So talk to us if you're considering that. And leveraging of other CDBG funds is a requirement of that program. So each of those activities, those eligible activities that I just listed, are all eligible under the program, but each of them, in order to be funded, has to also meet a national objective of the program. So you can do, say, a public service activity, but you can only fund a public service if the beneficiaries are eligible under one of these national objectives. So if you're uncertain about how to do this, if you haven't participated in the program before, just speak to us about that. We can give you some guidance. But the three broad national objectives of the program are benefit to low and moderate income persons, prevention or elimination of slums and blight, or meeting a community development having a particular urgency. The last one is very rarely used. It's generally done when there's a national disaster that's declared by the president. But benefit to low and moderate income will require that 70% of the program funds under the block grant program go toward assisting activities that meet that national objective. The remaining 30% may be used for elimination of slums or blight. And many times, blight removal is also being done in an area that's low and moderate income. So that can be done in low income areas. And then just real quickly, the block grant program does include a provision called the Section 108 Loan Guarantee Program, whereby communities, Nassau County can apply for funds by a loan that we can then reloan to municipalities. It allows communities to receive significantly more money than they could under the program in a general year. But it is a loan, so it does have to be repaid. So the purpose would be to encourage the creation of housing units available to low and moderate income persons, or to create full-time jobs, the majority of which would be available to persons of low and moderate income. So that's how that job creation would also comply with the national objective of low and moderate income benefit. So it's the creation of full-time jobs that would generally be. So generally the test is at least 51% of the jobs have to be available to low and moderate income people. By available to, we're looking at the types of jobs that are being created. What's the skill set? Whether the employer would be offering the jobs to persons without higher education and providing on-job training and that type of thing. So that's generally looked at on a case-by-case basis if the loan would comply. And this is true for economic development purposes as well, under the regular CDBG program. So some of the uses of block grant dollars, Section 108 loan dollars rather, would include the acquisition of real property, site preparation for properties, purchase of equipment for economic development purposes, and rehabilitation of real property. But again, all of them will have to meet a national objective. Now, the difference between block grant dollars and the Section 108 loan is, again, it's a loan, has to be applied for directly by HUD. So HUD reviews the eligibility criteria beforehand, whereas with the block grant dollars, our office is tasked with doing that before we award the funds, and we monitor at the back end. A Section 108 loan has to be approved directly by HUD headquarters. Okay, so that's, in summary, the Community Development Block Grant Program. The Home Investment Partnerships Program, as I mentioned earlier, has received recent severe cuts to the program funding. In 2003, it was the high water mark for the program. We received just over $4 million. That declined to about 3.4 in 2011, and now we're expecting about 1.6. So you see we've received, the program's been cut by more than half over the last 10 years. Now, the program had a final rule published in July of 2013, where the emphasis was some changes to the program that emphasized the assessment of risk for activities and projects. The reason for the final rule being published was a lot of activities were being funded and never completed because of cost overrun, because of poor site selection, or at that time there was also the response to the mortgage foreclosure crisis. There was a lot of properties built with home dollars that could not be occupied. People just didn't have the funds to purchase them. So it also encouraged monitoring performance and compliance, stricter subsidy lay requirements and underwriting guidelines, and assessing a minimum market conditions to make sure that there's a need for the housing in the area and the housing type. Housing development experience of the person undertaking the development, and firm financial commitment to the project. In the past, the county would be able to award funds, home funds, to a project, and then the developer would be able to go out and seek other funds that needed to make the project happen. Now the home funds cannot be the first money in. You need to see that there are firm financial commitments from other sources before we can award the home dollars. But we can speak to you, to the municipalities, to the nonprofit developers, to for-profit developers, and work through the parameters of your project, and make sure that if we have room, that we can fund projects while you're shopping for the other sources of funds. So we can work with you on that. Okay, the final rule also established project completion deadlines. They made them much stricter. So any project that has not been completed within 4 years of date of commitment will be considered terminated by HUD, and the funds will be recaptured. New requirements are also in place to ensure timeframes for initial occupancy or rental of units are met. So I just want to make sure that there are not projects that are being funded and built and then not occupied. The home program also requires 15% set aside of funds for community housing development organizations. These are projects that are either owned, developed, or sponsored by a CHODO. So CHODO is a nonprofit organization, has representation on its board from the local community and representation of the low moderate income population. So the county is required to review the eligibility of the CHODO and make a designation of the CHODO as eligible prior to receiving an application for funding. And this CHODO, in addition to having representation, also has to have demonstrated capacity to undertake the type of activities it's doing. It has to have a history of working in the community. And it has to also have paid staff now, which is a new requirement. So eligible activity of the home program are, as you would imagine, acquisition of property for development of affordable housing. You can also acquire buildings and convert them to affordable housing. New construction of housing, reconstruction, and rehabilitation of non-luxury housing. Now, the home funds, home development does not have to consist solely of affordable units. It can be a mixed income unit. The home funds can be targeted to specific projects. So a lot of villages and towns now have affordable set-asides in development projects where a developer can receive or can build higher than the allowable density of units, provided that they have a set-aside of units, usually 10%, sometimes 15 or 20% of affordable. The home funds can be used to target those units, so to help subsidize the development costs for a developer. So if you have projects in your community or developers that you're speaking with, please contact us and we can walk you through it and get to more specifics on how the home funds can be utilized. Home funds, other eligible activities would include tenant-based rental assistance. To this point, the county has not used home funds for that purpose, and we don't anticipate doing so. That's a category of need that's usually met by the Section 8 program. Payment of reasonable administrative and planning costs are eligible, and operating expenses of community housing development organizations. That is something that we funded in the past, but right now the restrictions on CHODOs are making it difficult for us to do that. But if we have a CHODO project, we would consider funding some of the operating costs of the CHODO as well. Okay, the home funds, the assisted must be permanent or transitional housing. You cannot have emergency housing under the home program. That would be something that might be eligible under the block grant or the emergency solutions grant program, however. So the county has established a number of priorities where we're considering applications. We're looking at projects that will result in increased ownership or rental units. So any projects that have increased units or adding new units to the universe of available properties, that's a positive. whether they're located in non-impacted areas in existing downtowns, so non-impacted mean those areas that have higher concentrations of poverty or low income, and result in increased number of units that are accessible to disabled populations. These are all, again, categories that are being considered when we're putting together our 5-year consolidated plan. What's the need for different types of housing in the county? So the 5-year plan we're working on right now is a 5-year plan, those figures that were utilized putting together the previous 5-year plan. However, we have some of the figures in hand now, so some of this may change with the production of our next 5-year plan. We may see that we have a greater need for housing, say, for large families as opposed to small families, or we may see the opposite. We may see that we have a higher need for senior housing or for the housing for the disabled. Those are figures that will determine when we look at the data. So some of these preferences may be changed. But of course, demonstrating firm financial commitments, make sure the project has all the funding committed to a project before we provide the home funds is mandatory. So those projects that bring other sources of funds to the table will be looked upon more favorably. So you can go through the listing there. I should have mentioned at the outset that there are copies of the handout of the PowerPoint slides available for everyone. So if you didn't receive a copy, when you take notes, everything I'm pretty much going over is in the handout. All right, so here you see home program benefit. Number and location of new housing units are always considered. The degree of low income benefit. But again, we will look at mixed income projects as well. Proximity of projects to Long Island railroad stations or Long Island bus. Many times the cost of housing is impacted by the cost of transportation. So where we can provide some affordable housing near public transit opportunities and will reduce the overall housing costs of the residents. So that's always positive. Proximity to downtowns is a benefit, central business districts, and inclusion of green building and green development standards. It's not something that HUD mandates at this point, but it is something that they collect data on, so it may be something that they are looking to require in the future. All right. And again, incorporation of universal design principles and provision of visibility standards, so that housing is accessible for those with disabilities is a positive. Okay, those applications that demonstrate that they are consistent with local visioning, so if there's a community, or if you're representing a community or a civic organization that has undertaken a visioning plan, we want to make sure that the housing that is being proposed is consistent with that plan. We want to see that there's evidence of required local municipal approvals. They don't need to be in the application at the outset, but they will be required before funding is awarded. Evidence of outreach, involvement, and cooperation of intent with residents. And the proposals must include a well-designed and implemented fair housing marketing plan for initial and ongoing occupancy. That's something that we monitor on an ongoing basis. So in terms of the applicant, we want to see that they have proven experience in developing housing. They have the financial capacity to complete the project that's being proposed, and that the project is ready to proceed. Many times we will hold funds for a project until they can get all their final approvals. We can't guarantee that the money will be there when they need it, but we'll try and work with developers as best we can. We don't want to have them with anticipation that they're receiving home funds. And like again, we cannot commit the funds by a contract to a project that doesn't have all of its financing in place. But as best we can, hold on to funding. When a project is ready to proceed, we'll try and do that, as long as we don't bump up against HUD commitment deadlines and expenditure requirements. So applications that are thorough and demonstrate the ability to complete the project within 24 months of award will be given preference there. All right, in addition to the 3 programs that we receive funding from, the county also has brownfields development, redevelopment loan funds available. Brownfields are sites with potential for redevelopment or reuse, but which remain unused or underutilized because of known or suspected environmental contamination. So the brownfields funding that we have is funding available from the EPA. The county has a revolving loan fund established. There's funding available in that loan fund right now, and we anticipate more coming back in the year. So we'd like to get that back out on the street. So this is funds that can be used to further another project in your community. It is a loan, though, it has to be repaid, so we have had some interest in the past from communities who want to remediate, say, an old gas station in your downtown and create parking or create a park. Since those would not be revenue-generating uses, we would not be able to award the funds to that. But as long as the funds can be repaid, we can hopefully work something out. But So our preference is to locate contaminated properties in near or close to downtowns that could be utilized for another purpose. All right, so the primary objective is to facilitate the redevelopment of sites to provide economic benefits to the local community and mitigate health and environmental risks. And the last program is the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. Now, HUD published an interim rule back in December of 2011, so it's 3 years old already. It has not gone final, but we are operating under the new requirements of the interim rule. To keep this Emergency Solutions Grant Program, if you've been active in the program, you've probably heard me say this for the last few years. This was a program that used to be called the Emergency Shelter Grants Program, and the funds are primarily used by existing shelters for rehabilitation, operations, and for maintenance of the shelters, and for essential services provided to the homeless. With the change to the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, there's more of an emphasis by HUD on preventing homelessness and helping the homeless get back into housing, or rapid rehousing as the term is used. But under the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, there are 4 eligible categories of activities: street outreach, emergency shelter, which would include all the components of the old shelter program, rehab, operations, maintenance, and essential services, the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing, and the HMIS, which is the HUD data collection. So it's essentially a software program. So it allows shelter providers to get access to the program and report on their occupancy and their services. And just to get back to the Fair Housing Project, all of the HUD program funds, all the Fair Housing Act, you're all required to comply with the Fair Housing Act. But the proposed rule that's out right now has a new definition of affirmatively further fair housing, which has been a matter of confusion for many. So the proposed rule is trying to clarify what affirmatively further fair housing means. So I put the entire definition up on the slide, even though it's maybe a little hard to read. But essentially, affirmatively further fair housing, by its definition, means taking proactive steps beyond simply combating discrimination to foster more inclusive communities and access to community assets for all persons protected by the Fair Housing Act. More specifically, it means taking steps proactively to address significant disparities in access to community assets, to overcome segregated living patterns and support and promote integrated communities, to end racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, and to foster and maintain compliance with civil rights and fair housing laws. For participants subject to this subpart, these ends will be accomplished primarily by making investments with federal and other resources, instituting strategies, or taking other actions that address or mitigate fair housing issues identified in an assessment of fair housing, and promoting fair housing choice for all consistent with the policies of the Fair Housing Act. So the Fair Housing Plan that I mentioned earlier, that's being developed as part of the 5-year consolidated plan, will list the disparities, the impediments to fair housing choice in the county, and then propose actions to undertake to overcome those barriers. So under all of our programs, sub-recipients and contractors are responsible for implementing their projects in compliance with the Fair Housing Act and local, state, and federal laws. They're required to actively enforce the provisions of those acts, and they also are required to take affirmative steps to promote fair housing and equal access to housing. All right, so our funding applications in last year were revised to collect information related to affirmative further fair housing. Those requirements, those questions are still part of our applications. So the analysis of impediments in the Fair Housing Plan that are being developed will consider other factors beyond the use of block grant dollars. So it's not just that you're ensuring that the block grant dollars you're receiving or the home dollars you're receiving are in compliance with the Act. It's a requirement that your municipality is in compliance with the laws in general. And overall compliance with the Fair Housing Act and related laws will be considered when we're making our funding awards. In addition to the Fair Housing Act, the Section 3 rules apply to construction-related projects. This is something that's been in place for quite some time. Essentially, it's that projects that are funded by the HUD programs that generate jobs. So usually these are construction-related jobs, that those job opportunities are afforded to low-income residents within the community. So these are reports that are required of all construction-related projects at the end of the year. So it's about it only affects newly created jobs. Other federal requirements that are in place for all of our programs are the National Environmental Policy Act. So if you do, at the end of this process, receive a funding award, there's an environmental review that's required and released from HUD for all activities. So if you receive funding, you'll hear more about this later on, but every activity has to go through an environmental review. Davis-Bacon wage rates apply to construction-related contract projects under the block grant program. Davis-Bacon wage rates kick in for a project that is more than $1,000. And that requirement goes back to the 1930s, so it hasn't changed. So $1,000 limit. 2,000. 2,000. Thank you. It's a low, obviously it's a small amount, but that's why it's so low. Under the home program, it's triggered when we're assisting more than 12 units of housing. And under the block grant housing side, it's only for projects that involve more than 8 units of block grant housing. Uniform relocation assistance and real properties acquisition policies act applies, as does the lead-based paint regulations. Okay, so what we'll be looking at in applications is activity timeliness and targeted completions. HUD's making a concerted effort now to look at activities that have been funded but have not been completed. So in an effort to reduce the number of open activities, we've been trying to be proactive at the outset to make sure that your projects have strict timelines and to comply with those timelines. So all of our applications will request this information. Activities, this is essentially applies to municipalities, not to nonprofits that receive funding directly. But activities that have flagged activity types, so if you're a municipality, a village or a town that say has funding in an open activity line for property acquisition or for commercial rehabilitation, and that activity is flagged by HUD because it's been inactive, we won't be awarding more funds for an acquisition or for a flagged activity without a remediation plan. So if you're negotiating to buy a piece of property in the downtown, you have some funding available, but you're working it through the courts, say, or you need some additional funding, the money that you have is insufficient, that's something that we could work through with you. But if you just submit an application without an explanation as to what you're going to do with the existing funding you have, it's not something we will funding you until it's resolved. And again, these are sometimes onerous requirements that HUD is imposing, but they do serve a purpose to keep the funds moving. Okay, so the application process. Notices of funding availability are available. They're at the back table. They'll also be posted on the office website. The website is listed there. If you go to nassaucountyny.gov and you look under departments, you'll find the Office of Community Development. And the front page of the Community Development screen will have a spotlight. So all the highlighted sections and the application links will be found right underneath there. The home application is still being finalized, so that should be available, we're hoping by Monday or early next week. But the CDBG application and the Emergency Solutions Grant applications are both available this morning. Are they there today? Okay. All right, so activity timelines and target completion. This goes to the goal of making sure that the funds continue to move. What we're looking for activities that include construction are strict timelines. We want to know different milestones in your project and when you expect to complete them. For public service activities, when your activities will start. Now again, the program year start date is September 1st. Applications will be due, as you'll see, April 1st. The county reviews applications during the summer. We get legislative approval. The applications submitted to HUD. We usually receive award of the HUD funds sometime in October. So even though our program year starts September 1, and contracts will be effective as of September 1, you won't have access to the money usually until early January. Just keep that in mind. So any project, if you're coming here today looking for a project for a summer youth program, we're not talking this summer, we're talking summer of 2016. And any public services that have a balance of funds after remaining after 2 years, that money will be recaptured if it's to a direct nonprofit. If it's a municipality that's awarding funds to another nonprofit, we'll ask the municipality to reallocate those funds to another project. So we're asking again for complete activity budgets. Your budget for an activity should include obviously what funding you're requesting this year, but should also consider funds that you already have in hand. So again, the example of a activity property acquisition. If the acquisition is going to cost $350,000, you have $200,000 remaining in an older year, you want to use that, now you'd only be looking for another $150,000. So that should be clear on your activity budget, where all the funds are coming from. If you're getting funds from another source, say state funding, or from a foundation, that should be included as well. Okay, all the municipalities that are members of the consortium, you saw the list earlier, should be scheduling their own local public hearings to encourage local input on their own local needs and where the funding should be applied for. We will have pre-submission requirements with selected consortium members to discuss any issues that we may have with their current allocations. And the CD rep will contact you if that's necessary. Again, we want to impress upon you timely submission of applications is imperative. As we go through our review process, we're receiving less funding each and every year. So applications that are not received by April 1st, please let us know that if you can't get your application to us by April 1st, at least give us a summary, send us the brief description of what you'll be applying for and how much you'll be applying for, so we can at least consider you when we're looking at other applications. We don't want to be shutting anyone out of funding just because their application is late, but we can only hold on to the funds for so long. We need to make funding decisions as the spring progresses. Every activity is required to meet a performance measurement system. And this is explained a little bit further in the application as well. So we asked to indicate which performance measure your activity addresses and what your project outcomes are. This is just a general category that the Synod HUD and the Office of Management and Budget came up with to try and keep the funds moving. Excuse the yawning in the front. I'm trying to move through this as best as I can, but I want to keep you. And this is just a flow to show how different types of activities might fit into the performance measures. Okay, so public service applications. The county will receive and accept applications from nonprofits that are providing public service. However, if the type of service that you're providing is restricted to a local community, say you're a public service and you're operating in the city of Long Beach or the village of Freeport, and your constituency is primarily from those jurisdictions, you should be applying to the city or to the village. If your constituency, your public benefit is to a greater area, so the South Shore or the entire county, then you should apply to the county for funding. There is a minimum allocation of public service activity dollars of $4,000. We set a floor on the funding a few years ago just because the reporting requirements have become so onerous. It's just not worth the effort to provide funds less than $4,000 and then have to do all the reporting for it. So we asked all the villages and towns to comply with that floor as well. All right. And again, if you're a nonprofit considering applying for funding, these are the municipalities that are in the consortium right now. If you're operating in a village that is not part of the consortium, and you're not eligible to apply for funding from the county, you have to apply to New York State for funding. So if you're working in a village that's not on the list, then you need to find out how to apply for funding through New York State. If you're in a hamlet, so if you're part of an unincorporated area of one of the towns, like Oceanside or Plainedge, you can apply directly to the town of Hempstead for Oceanside or Oyster Bay for Plainedge. But if you're an incorporated village, then you need to make sure that you're on the list. Okay, so important dates. April 1st is the final application should be submitted to the Office of Housing and Community Development. June 16th, we anticipate making final decisions and make the action plan available for public comment. That's a 30-day public comment period. And then 1 month later, we anticipate submitting the final document to HUD. September 1st is the program year start date, but as I said, we generally don't receive official word from HUD that our application is approved. If we get the application to them by July 16th, they have to either approve it or disapprove it by September 1st. It's a 45-day window that they have. That doesn't mean they have to tell us they approved it or disapproved it. That just has to be done. So we'll get a letter sometimes 3 weeks later with the date of September 1st on it. And then we'll get a contract sometime thereafter with your actual money. So there is a bit of a process. So just, you shouldn't be anticipating that you'll have funds available September 1st, even if you are funded. And some other important dates to consider. This is really for projects that received funding last year or have been spending funding this past year. March 15th, September 15th, so semi-annually, there's a semi-annual labor standards report that's due. These are for construction-related projects. September 15th is when the contract or subcontract activity reports are due. These are all also for municipalities. October 15th is when the Section 3 reporting is due. And October 15th as well as when the CAPER reporting is done. That's the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. That's a report that collects information on what you did with the money we gave you a year ago. So that's if you're providing funds to do a housing rehabilitation program, how many people did you assist, where was the property located, what type of work did you do, all demographics involved with the beneficiaries. And the same thing for public service. What did you do with the funding, how many people participated in your program, what's their low and moderate income breakout, and their ethnicity and so on. So that's all included in the report that you receive. It's actually, we usually go over that with any new nonprofit at the outset, so they know what kind of data they need to collect as the program is getting underway. We also have a rescheduled training that was snowed out last month. It's HUD Davis-Bacon wage rate compliance. This is available to all municipalities, but if you are a developer or a nonprofit that's considering doing construction work, either with CDBG or home funds, you may want to participate in this as well. Davis-Bacon wage rate compliance is the prevailing wage requirements for construction contracts. So it'll be, the training will take place at our offices at 40 Main Street in the Village of Hempstead. We had pretty much a full registration list for the training that was canceled. So you should have received information about the rescheduled date and time. If you're not sure if you can attend, just let us know. And we will have a HUD labor standards officer come out and provide that training. She did training a few years ago and she was excellent. So I encourage you to attend.
Is there a time set for that yet?
There is a time set, what is it, 10 o'clock? 10:30? 10:30 in our office. We are asking everyone to RSVP because there is limited space. No. This is HUD training. HUD doesn't provide anything. There's a water fountain in the and again, just an outreach as we try and do every year. The county does administer a homeowner residential rehabilitation program at our office for any interested village that elects to apply for funds into that program. And I guess I should maybe explain this. If any village out there that's considering doing residential rehabilitation, you would do the outreach. It's on the village's responsibility to do the outreach to the local community. Generally, that's done as part of your newsletter. There is an income eligibility requirement. So those anybody household receiving 80% of income, the area median income or less, is eligible to apply. Our office would do an income eligibility check. We send an inspector out to the house, sits down with the homeowner, assesses what the needs, the rehab needs would be, and then a punch list or a scope of work is put together. That's bid out by our office, as long as, and the village has to agree to the scope of work prior to it being bid out. And then when the bids come in, it's awarded again with the village's acquiescence, and the project is underway. We send inspectors out to check on the work, and as long as the homeowner and the inspector and the village are all satisfied with the work, the contractor gets paid, and the homeowner gets the benefit of improvements to their home. So any village out there who hasn't participated in the program before, you're open to the three towns, Hempstead, Oyster Bay, and North Hempstead, all administer their own programs, but the villages and the cities generally participate in our program. It just makes it a little bit easier for staffing. But we are looking for licensed home improvement contractors to participate in this program. In order to participate as a contractor, you have to be on an approved list. So any contractors that are eligible, there's an application form that's downloadable from our website. We'll send an inspector out to preview some of your past work, make sure that your work standards are up to par, and then you'll be able to participate and bid on projects under the program. So if you know of anyone, or if you are a licensed home improvement contractor, just let know that there is a program available to you. This coming April, right after the submission of the applications, is National Community Development Week. So we do try and promote the program every year in cooperation with our municipalities. So if you have projects that you're undertaking this year that you think are laudable and you want to promote them, please work with us and we'll try and get the word out. And we do have a quarterly newsletter that goes out as well. We'll try and highlight some of the better uses of funds in that. Do we have copies of the newsletter today? No? Didn't bring it with us? Okay. But that's downloadable from our website as well. Just the past newsletters available there for you to review. All right, so that ends the formal presentation. If anyone has comments, you want to just stand and state your name and organization. We do have people taking notes, but if you do wish to submit any written comments, you can do that as well. And And it doesn't have to be just today, it's throughout the entire public participation process. We welcome all comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate all the hard work, as well as the other staff of Housing and Community Development. And if I knew a public hearing would put Larry to sleep, we would have one every day. So. Did you have a question, Larry? From Homes, Homecoming Heroes,
Right.
Larry Scola.
Hey, 29, can we go back to 29? Because this is so small, even my seeing eye dog can't read it. But,
Your wish is my command, Larry.
Wait,
There you go.
can you bring 29 back up?
Right there.
Pivot, if you notice in there, what is that number, where am I at? Okay, next to the bottom, assist eligible U.S. military veterans in that program. Is that, are they just a part of it, or maybe a whole part of a building or something? I'm trying to, use the word loosely, and we try to figure out where we can put them.
Right, there is ongoing legal action, legal questions about whether preferences can be used in various programs. Right now, it's the county position that we are not providing funds for any program that includes preferences. That would include, to our reading of it, military veterans. You cannot have a project that is, and this is I'm talking about housing projects, exclusively for the use of military veterans. Once that's finalized by the courts, we'll adjust that as we see fit. But right now, we will consider applications where you're doing outreach.
Eligibility, so.
Yeah, they're eligible.
Question.
Well, anyone on the list is eligible, but there's always income restrictions.
Mhm.
But you cannot have preferences right now for any projects. Again, these are matters that are being settled in the court right now. So until they're settled, we're acting under the provision that we won't allow any provisions. We won't provide any funding for any housing where there's preferences. That includes military veterans.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that they can't participate in housing. Of course, they're welcome to participate in housing like anyone else. So you can do outreach. And we encourage you to do outreach to all classes of people. That's part of what the Fair Housing Act promotes, is outreach and inclusiveness. But, so we'll look at projects that are doing particular outreach. If you're working with the Military Veterans Organization and they're working with you, that's going to be a positive for your project, obviously. And if there are other funding sources that are providing funding and they're going to be doing outreach or assisting you in any other way, we'll welcome that. But as long as the program requirements don't conflict, we have to make sure we stay in compliance with the home program.
Yes.
In the assistance through the villages to residential homeowners for rehabilitation, can that be done in the cases of the people that are not receiving housing funding?
Well, not all of our consortium members participate in a res
No, but
rehab program.
if your village is
Okay.
a participating consortium member, can they apply for that funding to assist homes that are not rehabilitated because community housing has not been received?
Well, I mean, if it falls under the criteria of what the program entails, just to clarify, Res Rehab is a weaponization program, so whatever falls under that criteria, if it overlaps, I would say yes.
But the municipality has to apply for the funding, not the individual.
No, it would be the individual resident that would apply to the municipality that participates in a Res Rehab program.
The municipalities apply first.
Correct, yeah, yes. The initial application would have to include a res rehab component. And once we agree that that is an eligible and proper use, then the resident can apply directly to the municipality. You're welcome. Anyone else? My two best friends in the back? My new best friends in the back. Yes.
How
Yes,
can
sir.
we find out the income limit? Is that available through your office, that 80%
Yes,
level?
absolutely. If anyone has any questions, we...
Let me elaborate on that.
Sure.
HUD publishes income limits every year. The income limits apply differently to different types of projects. So some of those eligible activities that I mentioned are what we call area benefit activities. So in that case, we're looking at census data to see that there's enough of a concentration of, let me call up another note that I was going to be giving tomorrow. I don't have it on. So area benefit activity, if you look at census data, so we look at the number of low and moderate income persons in the area that are be benefiting. So if you're going to do, say, streetscape improvements in a downtown community, some villages have low and moderate income service areas, some villages do not. So we can do those types of activities in some villages and some not. For the home ownership programs or for the public services where we can actually identify the people who are benefiting, then you would have to look at income information for the specific beneficiaries, for the specific homeowner, for the people who are participating in the after-school program, that kind of thing. And those income limits are all posted on the website. They are, it's, one is, oh, you have them back? Oh, they're in the application still, oh, great. And they are adjusted to family size. So for the block grant program, we're looking at 80% of area median income, which is the standard. For the home program, it's 80% for home ownership, 60% and 50% generally for rental. So they do have different income limits that apply to different programs. But generally, it's 80% for block grant. Home ownership under home is 80% of area median income, and then for rental it's a little lower.
Anyone else? Yes, in the back.
Hi, how are you? I want to ask, do you screen the organizations that are coming to apply for grants?
Any organization, there are certain requirements that are necessary to apply and be approved for funding. The criteria is something that we have. Just basic overview would be a 501c3 non-for-profit, and they would have to provide a public service conducive to our regulations.
Because from when I'm looking at this legislative meeting several weeks back, I see Operation Splash came and was granted $30,000. They're also mothered to VIP Splash that got almost $14 million from the community. And if you go look further into this organization to see what it's all about, then just because I see that this organization that you have, your program that you have running is an amazing program, and just to look at these people that really don't need to get the money. They're getting $14 million on one side, getting $30,000 on another side. There's something wrong with this whole picture.
Okay, I will definitely take your suggestions / inquiry to the appropriate individuals. I know the $14 million was not done through this department, and I believe it's a separate organization. But that being said,
it's the same players. If you look at who's on Operation Splash and VIP Splash, it's the same owners from one to another. One's volunteer and one's getting $14 million. It's they're misleading the public.
I would appreciate if you know, I know your comments will be recorded here, but if you can get something to me in writing, to mark the record, I would follow up in writing to you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes.
Can I comment on that? Clarify?
Sure. Are you a spokesperson?
I work for Operations.
Oh, you do? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Operation Splash. The $30,000, I wanted to endorse National Transmitted Community Development Block Grant, the process by which the funding comes through. That money is specifically for education. So the first issue is that money is in a pot that's for education. We serve every second grader in the Freeport School District. We work in every classroom with every teacher in Freeport. Starting in February, we're going to be working in Uniondale doing the same thing. So that money is completely used and accounted for. All of our requisitions are with receipts. None of that money is being used for anything but education of low to moderate income students in Nassau County, but right now we're concentrating on Freeport, Roseville, we have a few in Brooklyn, Belmont. The issue of VIP Splash Waterways is that that's a contract with the county. What you're thinking is the duplication of people is not. The board members of Operation Splash are board members of a nonprofit. The people that you might be thinking are players just happen to be members of Splash. But there is no duplication of services, there is no connection between the two except for that Operation Splash is research from Stony Brook and Adelphi. We're consultants to those guys before they ever went out and tried to clean it up with FEMA. So I know that this has been an old issue and it's brought up a few times, but I just thought I'd take the chance to clarify.
Isn't Rob Butler's wife on the board with VIP Splash?
Well,
I don't know.
I don't know these answers, and I don't believe it's the appropriate forum to have an open back and forth, so if we can set something offline, I mean, I don't want to hold these nice, I mean,
Sorry,
I'm not diminishing what you're saying, I'm just letting you know this is.
No, I just want the public to know what's really going on with Operation Splash and VIP Splash, that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And I understand it might be for educational,
Okay.
but they should check out their background before they give out money to these organizations. And some of their plays, Operation and VIP Splash, are on full disability. They're getting more federal money.
Well,
All of our nonprofits' financials are available online to anybody, in public disclosure.
And so is
You can
Operation
check that
Splash.
flow of money anytime you want.
maybe you guys can get together and further the conversation, so I don't.
I just wanted the public to know that they're one. Operation Splash and VIP Splash, they're all together, and they're trying to pretend they're not. That was my whole thing here.
And
And it's a new story.
Oh, I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
No problem. Anywhere else? You still sleeping? Yes, sir.
Yeah, two questions. One about the brownfields loan program. My question is, can that loan be used to further a brownfield nomination study? We may have gotten 2/3 into a 3-step process for a brownfield nomination study through grants from the state, and those funds have said that program has since been pulled. So we're now 2 of 3 steps into the process and left without funding to complete the study. Can that loan program be used to further a study, or is it only for brownfields that have previously received a brownfield nomination?
I don't know the particulars, but I do have Mr. Nimley, who heads that grant, and he can comment.
Yeah, the funds that we have are only for cleanup, all right? What you need to do, though, is possibly reach out to the United States EPA and find out from them if you can get a grant from them to continue your assessment.
We've made application. The federal funds are extremely competitive as compared to the state level.
Yeah,
We're aware, thank you.
no, sorry about that.
Okay. My other question had to do with the matching share to federal programs. And my question is, can that be applied to a program like the FEMA Public Assistance Program for a community which has several census tracts? Some may be LMI and some may not. So if we were facilitating a project that benefited an entire community, which on the whole may not be LMI, would those funds still be available to match something like the FEMA Public Assistance Program?
Well, you would be referring to CDBG funds as a match to
Federal program.
federal program. I don't know if there's any prohibition towards it, but I mean, you know.
Colin, the simple answer is block grant monies can be used for a federal match, so I'm going to say it's possible. The other question is it doesn't meet a national objective. It may be something that will fall under the slum and blight national objective, but that would require a slum and blight study of the area, because it's not something that's there's 2 different ways to do slum and blight. One is on a spot basis, whereas you can take down a building that was damaged by a fire and there's hazardous conditions. And the other way is to do a slum and blight study of an area that would consider the plume. Are you talking about the Massapequa, the Bethpage plume?
No,
No?
I wasn't referring specifically to that.
Okay.
More of a general inquiry.
So if it's an area benefit activity, then you might qualify under the low income national objective. If it's not in an area that's income eligible, it might qualify through a slum and blight study, and the contamination may be the cause of these blight, and then you can address the cause of the blight through the use of block grant dollars. So it's possible. We have to look at the area you're talking about and what the level of contamination is and so on, but what the impact of that is.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, we have repeat comments?
No,
If you say splash, I'm closing. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. The town of Hempstead do have 2 representatives right over there.
Okay, I just want to come speak to you.
Am I the moderator of that? Later. Am I included? Do I have
It's
to?
about the New York Rising and the funds that should be coming in through there. I thought it was part of this program, but there's like a DR at the end of it.
Yeah, it's that would be the disaster recovery, CDBGR. No, DR, CDBGDR, disaster recovery.
I never came to work on.
Yeah, it's not, it's through New York State.
Yeah, we didn't get that to our department.
So who's funding to, like Island Park, for example, after Sandy, nothing has been done in my community. I'm in the town of Hempstead side, nothing, not storm drains, not roads, not anything. The next storm that rolls in, we're gonna be rolling out with it because the town has done nothing.
Yeah, I believe in New York State, there was 2 entitlements. One went to New York City, the other one was New York State.
Governor's Office of Storm
The Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. Do we have a member? Yeah, your basic answer is New York State.
We don't have a number to forward to you.
I heard it was county. That the money was gonna come down the pipe into the county, and the county was putting it out to. Is everybody over there going to say no?
That was the original one.
That was the original plan, but it's all state.
Rising and
Right.
find out what your community is.
I do, I have all that.
Funding
Yeah.
is not that I'm aware of.
New York Rising is New York State. It's a program from the Governor's Office. Anyone else? All right, next week, pitches and catches. All right, we're going with.